The station floated quietly above the swirling colors of the nebula. Its metal hull reflected streaks of blue, violet, and gold from the distant star cluster. Inside, corridors hummed with the low buzz of machinery, and lights flickered softly along the walls. Most crew members kept to their routines, repairing systems, monitoring sensors, or running diagnostics. But one figure sat alone in the observation deck, staring out at the vastness of space. Alara, the alien pilot, had always preferred solitude. She was skilled, precise, and calm under pressure, yet she carried a reputation that made others wary. Her eyes, a pale silver, scanned the stars with a quiet intensity. The observation deck was her place of peace, though few dared to enter. She didn't talk much, and her presence demanded respect, or fear. Today, the station faced a series of small but persistent malfunctions. Energy conduits flickered, minor alarms echoed through corridors, and one of the docking bays reported an unexplained pressure drop. Alara had tried to address some of the minor issues herself, but the larger systems required a specialist, someone trained in human engineering. The thought made her frown. She was used to handling problems alone. Asking for help was a rare necessity, one she did not enjoy. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Alara turned slightly, her gaze narrowing as the door slid open. A human stepped inside. He was tall, lean, with a calm presence that seemed to contrast the constant tension of the station. Kyle, the human engineer, had been assigned to inspect the station's systems. He carried a small toolkit, but his eyes first sought the silent figure sitting at the window. For a long moment he did not speak. Instead, he walked slowly across the deck and sat down beside her. No greetings, no questions, just a quiet presence, side by side, as if he had always belonged there. Alara stiffened, unused to this approach. Crew members often tried to engage her in chatter or avoided her entirely, whispering behind her back. But this human, he simply sat. For several minutes, neither moved. The hum of the station and the distant colors of the nebula were the only sounds. Alara's instincts told her to look away, to rise and leave, but something about his calmness was unusual. It was not an intrusion. It was not a challenge. He was simply there. Finally, Kale reached into his toolkit and began examining a small console beside them. His fingers moved with careful precision, tightening a few loose connections and adjusting the power flow. Sparks that might have caused damage were carefully rerouted. The system stabilized almost immediately. Alara observed quietly, noting his skill. He had a patience and focus she recognized, qualities she herself valued but rarely shared with anyone. "You don't need to talk," Kale said finally, his voice low and neutral. "I understand systems better than words sometimes." Alara blinked. Words? That was unexpected. Most people tried to force conversation, probing her with idle questions. Kale's comment was simple, almost like a statement of fact, and yet it felt considerate. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him without committing to anything else. The first alert sounded from the docking bay. Pressure sensors indicated a minor breach in the outer hull of one of the storage compartments. Alara rose swiftly, her movements fluid and precise. "Follow me," she said simply, and Kale nodded. The corridor felt colder as they moved toward the docking bay. Red warning lights flashed along the walls, casting shadows that danced across the metal surfaces. Other crew members were already evacuating non-essential areas, moving with hurried efficiency. Alara's presence commanded attention, and the station crew parted quietly as she passed. Kyle followed without hesitation, keeping pace with her, long, confident strides. When they arrived, the source of the problem was clear. A loose energy conduit had cracked, allowing air to leak slowly into space. The compartment was empty, thankfully, but the breach needed immediate attention. Alara moved to secure the area, drawing on her piloting training and engineering knowledge. Kale knelt beside her, tools in hand, examining the conduit. "You'll need to reinforce this section," Kale said, pointing to a joint where the metal had weakened. Otherwise, it will fail under pressure again. Ilara's hands moved quickly, following his suggestion. She noted how he observed, how he offered guidance without taking control. It was rare for someone to treat her as an equal, rather than a subordinate or a subject of caution. The work was silent but synchronized, each action precise and efficient. Within minutes, the conduit was reinforced. The pressure stabilized. Alarms ceased. Crew members outside returned to their duties, noticing that the two figures had resolved the issue with remarkable speed. Kyle stood, brushing his hands off. "All stable for now," he said. Ilara nodded. She did not smile, not yet, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. Respect, perhaps trust. The first spark of connection in a long time. They moved back to the observation deck. Silence returned, but it was different now. Comfortable, almost. The nebula stretched out before them, a swirl of colors that seemed to reflect their quiet partnership. Kale didn't speak, and Ilara didn't ask him to. They simply watched. Minutes passed. The hum of the station, the distant lights, and the quiet presence of someone who understood. The simplicity of it was powerful. Ilara's mind, usually so focused on control and caution, began to relax. She realized that perhaps not all humans were intrusive. Perhaps some could simply be present. Kale finally spoke again, his voice still low and calm. "The station is older than some of the colonies we support. Systems fail, and we fix them. It's part of life." Ilara considered his words. There was no judgment, no pressure, no condescension, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. For someone used to carrying the weight of expectations alone, it was unusual, comfortable, safe. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe. Not fully, perhaps, but enough. She did not need to explain herself. She did not need to justify her solitude. Kale's presence was enough. An alert rang from the engineering bay, a minor fluctuation in the main power grid. Ilara glanced at him. Kale nodded, understanding. Without a word, they moved toward the problem, side by side. Their silent teamwork was seamless. Crew members watching from a distance whispered, noting how efficiently the human and the alien handled the situation. Minutes turned into hours as they repaired systems, rerouted energy, and stabilized failing modules. They did not talk, but communication flowed through gestures, glances, and the rhythm of their work. Ilara had faced countless crises before, but never with someone who understood her without asking for explanations or personal stories. By the time the repairs were complete, the station was fully operational again. The alarms had ceased. The hum of machinery returned to a steady, reliable rhythm. The nebula outside had shifted in its colors, now a deep purple with hints of gold, casting a soft glow across the observation deck. Kale returned to the window, sitting again without a word. Ilara followed, noting the subtle warmth in his presence. She remained silent, but she did not move away. For a brief moment, the isolation she had carried for so long felt lighter. Someone had sat beside her without judgment, without expectation, without intrusion, and she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face the universe alone. The stars stretched endlessly before them, beautiful and indifferent, yet somehow comforting. Ilara and Kale sat quietly, watching, repairing, and simply being. In the silence, a new bond began to form, one built not on words but on respect, understanding, and shared purpose. And for the first time in years, Ilara allowed herself to wonder what it might be like to have someone at her side, not as a colleague, not as a subordinate, but simply as a presence she could trust. The station hummed, the nebula glowed, and two figures, alien and human, sat together, side by side, without a word. The station's systems hummed steadily after the emergency repairs. Red warning lights had faded to soft blues and whites, signaling normal operation. Ilara and Kale returned to the observation deck side by side, their movements silent yet purposeful. The nebula stretched endlessly outside, brilliant and calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos they had just managed. Ilara remained quiet. She was used to silence, used to the hum of machinery and the distant echoes of the station as her only companions. But Kale's presence beside her changed the atmosphere. He did not fill the space with meaningless chatter. He simply existed, working quietly when necessary, observing when needed and never imposing. It was a rare comfort. "Systems are holding steady," Kyle said softly after a moment. His voice did not demand a response. It was an observation, not a question. Ilara inclined her head slightly. That was enough. No words were needed. The human had a way of respecting silence that few could manage. She studied him for a brief moment, noting the calm confidence in his posture, the steady way he handled every task. He was not flashy, not loud, but every movement was deliberate and precise. He reminded her of how she had learned to pilot. A combination of focus, patience, and careful attention. Their quiet partnership was interrupted by another alert, a small energy fluctuation in the station's core. Kale's eyes flicked to the console nearby. Without a word, he stood and gestured for Ilara to follow. She nodded. Together they moved through the corridors. The station corridors were narrow, lined with glowing conduits and small maintenance hatches. The occasional hum of distant engines or the faint beep of sensors filled the space. Ilara had navigated these halls hundreds of times, yet today she felt different. With Kale beside her, the hallways felt less lonely, less isolating. When they reached the engineering bay, the source of the problem became clear. A minor energy loop had overloaded, threatening to shut down part of the life support system. Ilara's fingers moved over the controls, stabilizing the loop while Kale inspected the conduit connections. "You need to adjust the flux regulator," Kale said, pointing at the device. "If you don't, it will spike again in the next cycle." Ilara adjusted the regulator carefully. She did not speak. She did not need to. Kyle's suggestion was precise, clear, and professional. They worked in silent synchronization, each action complementing the other. Minutes later, the alarm ceased. The energy readings returned to normal. Ilara stepped back and observed Kale's calm assessment of the system. It was strange, this ease of cooperation without words. Most interactions she had with others required negotiation, diplomacy, or constant explanations. With him, there was no need for pretense, no judgment, only work, trust, and shared purpose. As they returned to the observation deck, a small crew of younger engineers watched from a distance. Some whispered among themselves, impressed by the efficiency of the alien and human team. Ilara ignored them, but Kale gave a small nod of acknowledgement. His presence made no show, yet it commanded respect naturally. Once back, Ilara resumed, her place by the window. The nebula had shifted again. Deep violet now dominated, interspersed with sparkling streaks of gold and white. Stars seemed to move slowly, as if breathing in rhythm with the station. Kyle settled beside her again, silent. He did not need to speak. The quiet shared between them was enough. Ilara's mind wandered, reflecting on her own isolation. She had spent years alone, even when surrounded by others. Her strict adherence to rules and her mysterious past had kept her distant. Yet Kale's silence did not demand an explanation. It did not pry. It did not judge. It simply existed beside her, steady and reliable. The calm was broken by a sudden series of sensor alerts. The station's outer shields had detected a group of small rogue drones approaching from the nearby asteroid field. They moved erratically, but fast enough to pose a threat if left unchecked. Ilara's posture stiffened, instincts alert. "Follow me," she said, and Kale rose immediately. He did not hesitate. Together they moved toward the control hub. The drones were already visible on the monitors. Small, metallic, and unpredictable, they swarmed near the station's perimeter. Most crew members would panic or hesitate, but Ilara's mind was clear. She began calculating trajectories, angles, and possible interception methods. Kale knelt at the control panel, accessing auxiliary systems, rerouting power to defensive emitters, and preparing to counter the drones. Unpredictable movement. They worked silently, seamlessly. Every decision was precise, every action purposeful. The crew watching from nearby could not believe how effectively the alien and human collaborated without uttering a single word. A small drone suddenly breached the outer shield, sending a burst of energy toward the hull. Ilara fired a precise pulse from the station's defense grid, intercepting the drone mid-flight. Simultaneously, Kale redirected power to reinforce the shield in the impact zone. The combined effort stabilized the system instantly. Ilara glanced at him briefly, noting the calm focus in his eyes. For the first time, she realized how much easier it was to face threats when someone else shared her burdens silently. Words were unnecessary. Actions were enough. Mutual trust, built through cooperation and skill, could speak louder than any conversation. The rogue drones retreated after several more failed attempts. Ilara and Kyle worked until the perimeter was secure, monitoring energy levels and ensuring the station's systems were fully operational. By the time the immediate threat passed, the crew erupted in quiet admiration. Ilara for her skill, and Kale for his calm efficiency and understanding. After the situation stabilized, Ilara returned to the observation deck. The nebula outside had deepened into rich shades of purple and indigo. Stars shimmered like tiny lanterns against the vast darkness. Kale followed, sitting beside her as he had before. "You handle pressure well," he said softly. "Most would panic." Ilara tilted her head slightly. No smile, no words of thanks. But she acknowledged the statement. That was enough. She did not need praise. She did not need validation. His words were simple, factual, and honest. She respected that. They sat in silence for some time. The station was quiet now, only the hum of machinery filling the background. Ilara's mind wandered over the day's events, reflecting on how unusual it felt to have someone beside her, not judging, not interfering, simply present. Kyle's quiet companionship had a strange, weightless quality, like the station itself. Finally, Ilara spoke, her voice low and deliberate. "You do not need to talk to understand me." Kyle glanced at her. "I do not," he replied. Actions are often clearer than words. A subtle nod passed between them, an unspoken agreement. They would work together, not as superior and subordinate, not as alien and human, but as equals facing the vastness of space together. Minutes stretched into hours. The observation deck became a place of calm reflection, not isolation. The nebula shifted again, painting the metal walls in soft hues. Outside, the stars continued their silent dance, indifferent yet somehow comforting. Ilara realized she had not felt this calm in years. Her mind, usually crowded with the weight of rules, expectations, and past mistakes, now felt lighter, not because the station was safe, or because the repairs were complete, but because someone had chosen to sit beside her without demand, expectation, or intrusion. Kale adjusted a small console beside them, ensuring that minor fluctuations in the station's energy supply were stabilized. He did not speak, not needing to. His presence alone was reassurance. For the first time in a long time, Ilara allowed herself to relax. The universe, vast and unfeeling, felt less lonely. And the human engineer, quiet and steady, had changed that simply by being there. As night fell over the nebula outside, the station continued to float silently, a fragile haven in the void. Ilara and Kyle sat together, two figures from different worlds, side by side. No words were necessary. Their actions, understanding, and shared purpose spoke more clearly than any conversation ever could. And in that quiet companionship, Ilara realized something profound. Perhaps she did not have to face the universe alone after all. The observation deck remained calm after the drone attack, but Ilara's mind was far from quiet. Her silver eyes traced the shifting nebula outside, but her thoughts were on something older, memories she had tried to bury. Years ago, on a distant mission, she had made a mistake that cost her entire team. The weight of that day had shaped her life. creating the cautious, solitary figure she now appeared to be. Kyle, noticing her distant expression, remained quiet. He had already learned not to ask too many questions. Human curiosity often sought explanations, stories, and confessions, but he had realized that Alara did not need words to connect. Sitting beside her in silence had already begun to build trust, a bond stronger than mere conversation. A soft chime broke her thoughts. The station's sensors had detected unusual activity in one of the storage sectors. Nothing alarming at first glance, just a minor fluctuation in energy output. But Kale's eyes narrowed as he checked the data. "That's not normal," he said softly. "Energy is being diverted somewhere." Alara rose quickly, moving toward the control hub. "Follow me," she said. Kyle did, adjusting his toolkit as they went. The corridors were quieter now, most of the crew occupied with routine checks. Yet Alara's mind was alert. Something about the energy readings felt deliberate, controlled, not accidental. When they reached the sector, Alara scanned the systems. "It's sabotage," she muttered, almost to herself. Kale crouched beside the main conduit and analyzed the diversion. "Someone knows this station well," he noted. "This is precise work, not random damage." Alara's eyes hardened. Sabotage was rare, and the station had always been considered secure. Her mind flashed back to her past failures, the mission that had cost lives. She had survived, but her colleagues had not forgiven her, and her reputation had suffered. Now she felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Kyle, sensing her tension, did not speak. Instead, he began examining the diverted energy lines, carefully tracing the source. Alara observed quietly, recognizing the same methodical patience she had always valued in herself. For once, she felt a strange relief. She was not facing this alone. Hours passed as they investigated the sabotage. The culprit was not immediately obvious, but the signs were clear. Someone was manipulating the station's systems, redirecting energy, and potentially preparing for something larger. Alara's heart tightened. She had faced crises before, but this felt personal. Someone wanted the station vulnerable. Kyle finally looked up from the console. "It's sophisticated," he said simply. "Whoever did this understands both human and alien systems." Alara's eyes widened slightly. That combination was rare, almost unheard of. It implied a team with knowledge spanning multiple species, a dangerous level of skill. Yet her mind did not race in panic. She had faced impossible odds before. With Kale beside her, she felt a sense of calm determination. Together they could handle this. The first attempt to trace the sabotage led them through a maze of maintenance tunnels. Alara led the way, navigating narrow passages and zero-gravity shafts with ease. Kyle followed, adjusting tools and scanning for hidden conduits. Silence hung between them, but it was the kind of silence that conveyed understanding, strategy, and shared purpose. At one point, they encountered a collapsed section of the tunnel. A weak structural support had given way and debris blocked their path. Alara paused, assessing the situation. Kyle knelt, examining the broken metal. "I can clear a path," he said, "but it will take time." Alara nodded, watching as he worked. She had never relied on someone in this way before. Most of the time, she solved problems alone. Yet his skill, calm presence, and efficiency made the task easier. Within minutes, Kyle had cleared a safe passage, allowing them to continue. As they progressed, Alara's mind returned to memories of her past. She remembered the mission where her miscalculation had caused a hull breach, resulting in the loss of her squad. She remembered the silence that followed, the judgment of her peers, and the isolation that had defined her life since. But now, with Kale beside her, she realized something important. Mistakes did not have to define her forever. Trust, action, and quiet companionship could help her move forward. They finally reached the source of the sabotage, a hidden control panel, cleverly disguised within the station's infrastructure. The energy diversion originated here. Alara studied the panel carefully. "This was intentional," she said. "Someone wanted to cause chaos, but not too quickly. They are testing us." Kyle nodded, scanning the interface. "They underestimated teamwork," he said. "We can stop this before it escalates." Ilara's hands moved over the controls, carefully rerouting the energy flow. Kyle assisted silently, providing precision adjustments. The sabotage was sophisticated, but together, they managed to stabilize the system. The energy readings returned to normal, and the threat was neutralized for now. As they stepped back, Ilara felt a strange sense of relief. She had faced her past, confronted the present threat, and not faltered. Kyle's presence had made all the difference. She did not need to explain herself. She did not need to recount her failures. His quiet support was enough. "Why did you stay with me?" Ilara asked quietly, almost to herself. Kale looked up, meeting her silver eyes. "Because some things are better faced together," he said. "Words are not always necessary." Ilara inclined her head slightly. She had never expected such understanding from a human. Most interactions required constant explanation, diplomacy, or careful observation. But Kale had chosen presence over words, action over talk, and in that choice, she found something rare: trust. The crew soon began to notice the two of them working together. Whispers spread through the station about the alien and the human, quietly solving problems that others could not. Ilara ignored the attention. She had never sought approval. But for the first time, she felt a subtle sense of belonging, not among friends or companions, but alongside someone who understood her without needing words. That evening, the observation deck was quiet once more. The nebula outside had deepened to a rich indigo, dotted with the sparkling lights of distant stars. Ilara sat in her usual spot, Kale beside her. No words were exchanged, but a new understanding had formed. Ilara's thoughts drifted to the future. She knew the sabotage was only a warning, a test of the station's defenses. Whoever was behind it would likely try again. But for the first time, she felt prepared, not alone, but with someone she could trust to face the unknown. Kyle adjusted a small console beside them, monitoring minor energy fluctuations. He did not speak. His quiet presence, his steady actions, were reassurance enough. Ilara realized that strength did not always come from words or orders. Sometimes it came from simple companionship and shared purpose. Night fell over the station. Lights dimmed along the corridors, and most of the crew rested. Yet Ilara remained at the observation deck watching the nebula, reflecting on her past and considering the challenges ahead. She was no longer simply the isolated guardian of the station. She was part of a team, a partnership formed in silence and trust. As she sat beside Kale, she realized the most important lesson of the day. Presence and understanding could speak louder than any words. Mistakes, past failures, and fear of judgment could no longer define her. Together, she and Kale could face whatever threats awaited them. The station, the nebula, and the distant stars were vast and unforgiving, but not insurmountable. For the first time in years, Ilara felt a sense of calm determination. She had faced her past, she had solved the present crisis, and she had someone beside her who understood without needing explanations. The weight of isolation had lifted slightly, replaced by the quiet assurance that she was not alone. Outside, the stars continued their endless dance. Inside, two figures, alien and human, sat together in silence. The bond between them, unspoken yet powerful, promised a future where challenges could be met together. And as the station hummed softly around them, Ilara allowed herself to hope. Hope, she realized, was not something she had allowed herself in a long time. But now, with Kale beside her, it felt possible. She was no longer just a guardian of the station. She was part of something greater, a partnership built on trust, action, and silent understanding. And in that silent understanding, Ilara found strength. The station hummed steadily, but the calm was deceptive. Ilara and Kale had stabilized the sabotage, but the subtle tension in the air remained. Energy readings were nominal, yet the knowledge that someone had tried to compromise the station lingered like a shadow. Ilara, usually vigilant and quiet, sensed the possibility of future threats. She was not used to sharing that burden, but Kale's steady presence reminded her that she didn't have to face them alone. The observation deck, their usual place of quiet, had become a hub of silent planning. Ilara studied the monitors, noting minor anomalies that could indicate another attack. Kale adjusted a console beside her, his hands precise, efficient. His attention to detail matched her own, a rare and valuable quality in a partner. "You notice patterns," he said quietly, not as a question but as recognition. "Most people overlook small fluctuations." Ilara inclined her head slightly. She had always prided herself on observation, yet the acknowledgement from someone else felt grounding. Kyle's quiet appreciation was a subtle but powerful reminder that she was not alone in her vigilance. Suddenly, another alert rang, this time from the station's defensive systems. A small fleet of rogue drones had been detected approaching from a distant asteroid cluster. Their movement was organized, coordinated, and fast. Unlike the previous swarm, these drones seemed purposeful, almost tactical. Ilara's posture stiffened, instincts sharp. "Ready?" she asked, not turning to look at Kale. "Always," he replied calmly. Together, they moved to the control hub. Ilara's fingers danced across the console, plotting trajectories, estimating velocities, and calculating interception angles. Kale monitored auxiliary systems, rerouting power to shields and energy emitters. The station's defense grid, once idle and passive, now hummed with energy under their coordinated control. The first drone breached the outer shield, firing a pulse that rattled the hull. Ilara's eyes narrowed. With precise timing, she activated the station's pulse cannon, intercepting the drone mid-flight. Simultaneously, Kyle rerouted power to reinforce the weakened section of the shield. The combination of their skills neutralized the immediate threat. More drones followed. Each one tested the station's defenses, probing for weaknesses. Ilara and Kale moved like extensions of the same mind. She piloted the defenses with calculated precision, while he adjusted systems silently, anticipating failures before they happened. Crew members watching from nearby could not believe how efficiently the alien and human worked together. A small explosion rocked one section of the outer hull. Sparks flew, but the station's shields held. Kyle quickly assessed the damage, rerouting power and stabilizing the hull. Ilara followed up by recalibrating the defensive array, ensuring no further breach occurred. Through the chaos, something remarkable happened. Ilara found herself glancing at Kale not for instruction but for reassurance. His calm, unshakable presence steadied her. In return, Kale seemed to anticipate her actions, adjusting his own moves as if they were part of a synchronized plan. Words were unnecessary. Their teamwork had evolved into silent communication, a bond built on shared purpose and trust. The drones retreated after repeated failures, moving back toward the asteroid cluster. The station's systems returned to normal, energy levels stabilized, and the alarms fell silent. Crew members erupted in quiet admiration. Whispers spread quickly about the alien and human who had handled the situation without apparent effort, without panic, and without conflict. Exhausted but alert, Ilara and Kale returned to the observation deck. The nebula outside had shifted to a deep sapphire streaked with gold. Stars glimmered against the dark expanse of space, indifferent yet beautiful. The quiet now felt earned, a reward for the skill and coordination that had saved the station. Kale settled beside her again, adjusting a minor energy flow with careful precision. Ilara did not speak, but she allowed herself to notice the subtle reassurance in his calm presence. She realized something she had long avoided admitting. Companionship, even in silence, could strengthen resolve. "You handled that well," Kale said softly. "Most would have panicked." Ilara tilted her head slightly, acknowledging the statement. Praise was not necessary, yet recognition carried weight. She had always valued efficiency and precision over words, and here was someone who understood that instinctively. The following hours were spent repairing minor damages and monitoring the station for further anomalies. Ilara noticed how natural it felt to work alongside Kale. Their actions required no verbal commands, no explanations. It was a rhythm, a flow of movement and decision-making that neither had experienced before. During a brief pause, Ilara reflected on the past, the mission that had shaped her solitude, the failures that had defined her reputation, and the isolation that had become a protective shell. Yet here, with Kale, that isolation seemed unnecessary. She did not need to explain her history. She did not need to justify her actions. His presence was acceptance itself. "Why stay so calm?" she finally asked, almost to herself. Kyle looked at her, thoughtful but not distracted. "Calmness is useful," he said. "It lets you see clearly. Panic makes mistakes, but most importantly, it lets you help others." Ilara considered this. She had spent years relying on herself alone, avoiding attachments to protect others from her mistakes. Yet here was someone who had chosen to face challenges beside her, silently, without judgment. She felt a small flicker of warmth, a rare emotion she rarely allowed herself. The observation deck remained quiet as the station hummed steadily around them. Outside, the nebula shifted, now a swirl of deep purple and violet. Stars sparkled, faintly, like distant beacons. Ilara's gaze returned to the window, but her mind was not on the stars. It was on the human beside her, the engineer who had chosen presence over words, action over empty conversation. For the first time in years, she considered the possibility of trust. Not trust in the station, not trust in the system she could manipulate, but trust in someone else. The idea felt strange, almost foreign, but it was not unwelcome. Kale's quiet confidence, his patience, and his respect for her silence created a bond that words could not capture. Minutes stretched into hours. The crew rested, systems stabilized, and the station floated silently above the nebula. Ilara and Kale remained at the observation deck, side by side. The silence was not empty. It was filled with understanding, strategy, and the quiet acknowledgement of shared experience. Suddenly another alert flashed, this one from the station's communications array. Signals indicated an unidentified ship approaching. Its signature was human, yet it carried modifications unfamiliar to the station's records. Ilara tensed, instinctive caution returning. Kale rose immediately, adjusting the console beside. "Them. This could be connected to the sabotage," Kyle said. "Or it could be someone seeking help." Ilara studied the incoming signals. Her instincts told her caution was wise, but curiosity and strategy guided her actions. She moved quickly, analyzing the ship's trajectory, assessing threat levels, and preparing defensive measures. Kyle assisted silently, rerouting power, monitoring shields, and providing real-time calculations. The approaching ship slowed as it neared the station. A transmission signal arrived, encrypted but clearly marked as a priority. Ilara glanced at Kale. "Decryption?" she asked. Kale's fingers moved quickly over the console, decoding the message. Within moments, the content became clear. A warning of potential danger from outside the station and a request for immediate assistance. It was unclear whether the message was genuine or a trap. Ilara's mind raced, but she remained calm. "Prepare docking protocols," she instructed. Kale complied, and together they adjusted the station's systems to receive the incoming ship safely, while maintaining readiness for any potential threat. For the first time, Ilara allowed herself to feel a subtle sense of anticipation. She was no longer facing challenges alone. Kale's presence, silent yet powerful, had shifted her perspective. Together, they could handle uncertainty, danger, and the unknown. The incoming ship continued its approach, the station prepared for its arrival. Outside, the nebula glowed softly, as if witnessing the quiet partnership that had formed within the station's walls. Ilara glanced at Kale once more, a small acknowledgement passing between them. Words were unnecessary. Their actions, trust, and silent understanding had spoken volumes. As the ship neared docking, the station hummed with energy, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. And Ilara, the isolated guardian, realized she had discovered something far more valuable than technical skill or tactical precision. She had discovered companionship built on trust, patience, and silent understanding. A bond stronger than words and stronger than fear. Together, alien and human, they would face the next challenge, side by side, silent, determined, and unafraid. The station's sensors flickered as the approaching ship drew closer. Ilara and Kale stood side by side at the control hub, their eyes scanning every detail of the incoming vessel. Its modifications were unfamiliar, a mix of human and alien technology. Suspicion and caution filled the air, but neither allowed fear to take hold. They had faced threats before, rogue drones, sabotage, and unknown dangers, and survived. Together, they could handle whatever arrived. The docking bay, doors opened slowly, revealing a sleek, angular ship. Its hull was dark, with faint blue lines pulsing along its surface. A transmission signal arrived, now decoded and clear. A plea for assistance from a remote colony threatened by an asteroid storm. The ship's crew had limited time, and the message carried a tone of urgency. Ilara's silver eyes narrowed thoughtfully. She understood the stakes immediately. If the colony was left unprotected, many lives could be lost. Kale observed the data alongside her, silent yet attentive, ready to assist. Their silent coordination had become second nature, a rhythm of action and awareness that required no explanation. Prepare docking procedures, Ilara instructed. Kyle adjusted the station's systems, rerouting energy and stabilizing the magnetic clamps. The ship's approach was smooth, precise, and controlled. The docking was successful, and the station's crew moved quickly to assist. Inside the ship, they found a small team of colonists, exhausted but unharmed. The leader, a human named Commander Lyra, explained the situation. A sudden asteroid storm had damaged their equipment, leaving them stranded. They needed immediate repairs and guidance to navigate safely back to their sector. Ilara assessed the situation quickly, her mind calculating risks, resources, and strategies. Kale followed her lead, assisting silently by stabilizing the ship's internal systems and checking energy conduits. Together, they coordinated a repair plan that required efficiency and precision. The colonists worked alongside them, guided by instructions that Ilara and Kale communicated through gestures, displays, and simple words. Their teamwork was seamless. For the first time, Ilara realized that collaboration did not weaken her independence, it strengthened it. Human and alien working side by side could achieve far more than isolation ever allowed. As repairs progressed, Ilara and Kale faced unexpected complications. The asteroid storm was intensifying, sending fragments close to the station. Shields needed constant adjustment, energy flows had to be recalculated, and defensive measures required continual monitoring. Each challenge was met with silent coordination and careful action. Kale adjusted the auxiliary shields, ensuring that minor hull impacts were absorbed without damage. Ilara piloted the station's defensive systems with precision, redirecting power and recalibrating pulse emitters to intercept incoming debris. Their actions were fluid, instinctive, and entirely synchronized. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the station, calm prevailed. Ilara and Kale's quiet leadership inspired the colonists, who followed instructions with determination. No words were wasted. Every action had purpose. By the time the storm began to subside, the repairs were complete, the colony's ship stabilized, and the station systems fully operational. Ilara allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. For the first time in years, she had faced a crisis with another person, not as a subordinate or rival, but as an equal partner. Kyle's presence, silent yet steadfast, had made all the difference. Together they had protected lives and ensured the station's safety. The colonists expressed their gratitude, but Ilara did not seek praise. She returned to the observation deck, Kale following as always. The nebula outside had shifted to a soft, warm glow, streaked with orange and purple. Stars sparkled faintly as if reflecting the quiet triumph of the day. "You handled that well," Kale said softly, breaking the silence only slightly. Most would have panicked. Ilara tilted her head, acknowledging him. She did not need to respond. The calm smile she allowed herself was enough. She had learned something valuable. Trust, cooperation, and quiet understanding could overcome fear and isolation. Words were not always necessary. Actions spoke volumes. For the first time, Ilara allowed herself to think beyond duty and vigilance. She considered the station, the crew, and the future. She realized that companionship, even silent, could bring strength, resilience, and hope. Kyle had shown her that she did not have to carry every burden alone. The next days were spent restoring normal operations. Minor repairs, system checks, and routine maintenance filled the schedule. Yet even in these ordinary moments, the bond between Ilara and Kale deepened. Their silent teamwork had become instinctive. Gestures, glances, and shared understanding replaced the need for constant dialogue. Crew members began to notice, quietly, admiring the efficiency and calm that the partnership brought to the station. One evening, as the station drifted above the nebula, Ilara returned to the observation deck. Kale joined her without a word, as he always did. They watched the swirling colors of space, the stars twinkling against the dark void. Silence stretched comfortably between them, no longer empty but filled with mutual respect, trust, and understanding. Ilara's thoughts turned to the future. The sabotage, the rogue drones, and the approaching colony had tested her in ways she had not anticipated. Yet she had emerged stronger not just in skill but in perspective. She realized that isolation had protected her in the past, but now it was unnecessary. Cooperation, trust, and shared purpose were far more powerful tools than solitude. Kale adjusted a minor control on the console, ensuring energy distribution was optimal. He did not speak, but the gesture carried reassurance. Ilara recognized it immediately, a quiet reminder that she was not alone. She allowed herself to relax, a small but meaningful gesture. The station continued to hum, a steady and comforting sound. Outside, the nebula shifted, deep blues fading into purples and golds. The universe remained vast, endless, and indifferent. Yet within the station something remarkable had taken root. Connection. Silent, unspoken, yet strong. Ilara finally broke the silence. "You do not need to leave," she said softly. Kyle glanced at her, eyes meeting her silver gaze. "I will stay," he replied, "if needed, or if wanted." A subtle nod passed between them. Words were still minimal, but the meaning was clear. Trust had been established, bond had been forged, and the future, once uncertain and filled with isolation, now held possibility. The days that followed were filled with routine, but nothing felt ordinary. Repairs, patrols, and station checks continued, but Ilara approached each task differently. She no longer carried the weight of isolation alone. Kale's presence had transformed her perspective. She allowed herself to consider collaboration, companionship, and the quiet strength of shared purpose. The crew began to approach her differently as well. Whispers of admiration replaced avoidance. They noticed her calm demeanor, her precision, and the efficiency with which she and Kale addressed challenges. Slowly, she was no longer just the isolated guardian. She had become a respected partner, a leader in silent strength. One evening, as the station drifted in orbit, Ilara and Kale returned to the observation deck. The nebula glowed softly, stars twinkling faintly. They sat side by side, quiet once more. Words were unnecessary. Their presence, actions, and shared experience carried meaning far greater than any conversation could. Ilara reflected on the journey, from isolation, mistrust, and past mistakes, to silent understanding, cooperation, and hope. Kale had taught her an invaluable lesson. Companionship, even without words, could overcome fear, isolation, and doubt. The station hummed around them, the nebula shifted, and the stars shone. Ilara realized she was no longer alone. She had found someone who would stand beside her silently and steadfastly through any challenge the universe could present, and in that realization she found peace. For the first time in years, she smiled quietly, not at the stars, not at the nebula, but at the human engineer beside her. No one had sat beside her for years. Now he had, without a word, and it had changed everything. The universe remained vast, full of challenges and uncertainty. But Ilara, the once isolated guardian, now understood something vital. With trust, action, and quiet companionship, even the greatest threats could be faced and overcome. Together, alien and human, they faced the endless expanse of space, side by side, silent, strong, unafraid.